What if everything you've seen in Mel Gibson's films is not just drama, not just cinema, but a carefully encoded message, not a script, but a key, not an image, but a prophecy? Look again. Don't look at the actor, don't look at the director. Look at the man who seems to know something others aren't meant to know, who has glimpsed the place where the soul ceases to be the body, who has left signs for those still searching. At first glance, Gibson's films might seem like just powerful stories, passion, suffering, salvation, war, faith. But that's only the shell, only the form in which he wraps ideas too dangerous or too deep to speak about directly. He hides them, like ancient mosaics, where each tile is part of a grand pattern, but you'll only see it if you take a step back. Have you ever felt that there is something more in his films than just plot? That the music, the camera angle, the silence between words speak louder than the dialogue? Or, like in The Passion of the Christ, that's not just a film, it's an experience, an initiation, a trial. Every blow, every drop of blood feels like a personal message to you, as if Gibson is trying to say, look, he's not the one suffering, you are, we are. It's the soul going through pain in order to remember something. He doesn't direct, he summons. He pulls out of the viewer everything hidden: fear of death, fear of loneliness, the longing for redemption. He knows that most have already forgotten, that eternity exists, and that everything we do here echoes there. In Apocalypto, he's not talking about the Maya, not about history. He's talking about a man running from his fate, unaware that salvation lies not in escape, but in sacrifice. That when the soul faces darkness, it shouldn't hide. It must remember and choose to remain human or dissolve into fear. Have you noticed how in his films there's always a moment when the character looks upward, one as if something invisible is speaking to them, and always after that, a turning point, a break, a rebirth? These are not just scenes, these are signals. He's hinting, look for the moment when you're left alone. That's when the soul speaks the loudest. Even in his acting roles, the structure is the same. In Braveheart, it's the cry of freedom before death. That's not just a scene, it's a challenge, it's a code. He shows that the body can be broken, but the spirit, never. That death is not the end if truth stands behind you. If your soul is pure, you will leave with your head held high. But who is he, Mel Gibson? Where do these themes come from, this obsession with suffering, this idea of atonement, this faith in the unseen? Why does he return again and again to sacrifice, to martyrdom, to pain as a path? What has he seen? What does he know? Or, the answers are not on the surface, but they are there, in every scene, in every silence, in every glance. You just have to look closely. Many critics don't like Gibson. They call him one-sided, fanatical, even obsessed. But maybe they're just afraid of what he reveals, because behind that obsession lies something greater. In his films, there isn't just action, there is a message. There is a hidden fear shared by all. The fear that after death, we do not disappear, that beyond the threshold there is judgment, and beyond judgment, continuation, and it depends on us. He doesn't say it outright, but think, how often do the characters in his films go to their deaths knowingly, not as victims, as witnesses, as those who understand? If not me, then who? This isn't a Hollywood pose, it's an archetype, an old, ancient, forgotten story. A story about a soul that must pass through fire to be cleansed. And each of his films is a variation of that same journey. Signs, a film many found strange. Aliens, mysticism, religion, all mixed together. But what if it's not about an invasion? What if it's about the soul again? About a father who lost his faith, about a man trapped in pain, and only through horror, only through shock does he remember that nothing is random, that the signs were always there, that destiny is not chaos, but meaning, that even loss is part of the plan. Those who watched the film on the surface didn't notice. The scenes are built like steps, from doubt to knowledge, from pain to acceptance. And in the end, when the hero stands in a ruined home but wears his priestly garments once more, that's not just an epilogue, that's a rebirth. That's the moment the soul returns to its mission. Gibson returns again and again to the theme of suffering, not as cruelty, but as a transition. He seems to whisper to the viewer, "Don't be afraid of pain. It opens the door." He places his characters before a choice, to break or to become more than they were. It doesn't matter where the action takes place, in the jungle, in ancient Galilee, or on a battlefield. What matters is that the choice is always the same, the death of the body or the awakening of the spirit. And now ask yourself, why would a director who could make easy box office hits choose these themes? Why go against the system, against trends, against comfort? The answer can only be one. He himself has experienced something that can't be explained with words, something that demands expression. And he speaks in the language of cinema, in the language of images, because speaking plainly is impossible, because maybe he has seen what others are not meant to see. And this is where it gets most interesting. If you really watch his films not as entertainment, but as a chain of symbols, you'll start noticing strange coincidences, words that repeat across scripts, motifs migrating from one film to another, characters who seem to change bodies, but not essence, as if he's writing one grand story, but giving it to us in fragments, as if the soul is the true protagonist of all his work. That's why each of his films feels like a piece of a puzzle. They work on their own, but if you watch closely, they come together into something greater. In Hacksaw Ridge, he tells the story of a medic who refused to pick up a weapon. Once again, suffering. Once again, faith. But this time, everything is different. The hero does not fight. He saves. And he does it with such conviction that it feels like someone is standing behind him, as if he hears something greater whispering to him, "Go, you are not alone." This is not just a war drama, it's almost a parable about a man who, despite pain, fear, and contempt, remains true to himself, not because he is stubborn, but because he hears what others have forgotten. He moves through hell and saves. And each person he pulls from the battlefield feels symbolically pulled from death itself, from hopelessness, from oblivion. Gibson doesn't make films for fame. He creates images that cut deeper than the screen. It's as if he wants to say, don't look at the picture, look through it. There is truth. And that truth is not always pleasant. Sometimes it frightens, sometimes it hurts. But it is real. It is like the voice of conscience, like an inner whisper you hear in the darkness when you are alone. Have you noticed how often his characters suffer in silence? How rarely they ask for mercy? How often they walk toward death with their eyes open? That's no coincidence. That's not just drama. It's the image of a soul passing through temptation, through hell, through terror, so that, on the other side, it might finally find peace, or maybe a new birth. In a world where cinema is more and more turning into flashy entertainment, Gibson moves in the opposite direction. He goes deeper. He takes risks. He shows what most people don't want to see, the real cost of choice, the real cost of life, and most importantly, the real cost of a soul. Each of his films is not just a story. It's like a personal confession, a revelation, as if he himself has been there, in the darkness, in the abyss, on the edge, and returned to tell about it, to warn, to remind, we are not just bodies, we are not just roles, we are something more. But why does he do this through blood, through torment, through pain? Maybe because it is precisely in suffering that the soul reveals itself. It is in suffering that a person remembers who they are, without a mask, without protection, at the limit, where all the excess falls away, where only truth remains. Gibson seems to say, do you want to hear what comes after death? Watch closely. I can't say it with words, but I can show you. And he does show, not directly, not loudly, But for those who are ready to see, it is enough. There are people who feel the truth in their skin, not through evidence, not through facts, but through some ancient inner knowing. Gibson is one of them. He doesn't speak openly about life after death. He doesn't make films about heaven or hell in the literal sense. But his entire body of work is filled with the feeling there is something out there, and that something is definitely more important than everything we see here. Oh, let's take his most well-known, most controversial film, The Passion of the Christ. It's not just a religious drama, it's a blow, a trial. For some, a shock, for others, a sacred experience. But almost no one walks away from the screening indifferent. Why? Because Gibson doesn't show a myth, he shows pain, suffering pushed to the limit. And in that suffering lies a great mystery. It's as if he's shouting, "Look, this is the path, this is the price, this is the door." He's not afraid to show cruelty because he knows, without pain there is no awakening. The soul does not awaken from comfort. It awakens from a blow, from a scream, from blood. And when the viewer in the theater shuts their eyes at what's happening on screen, in that moment, perhaps for the first time in a long while, they begin to wonder, what if all of this is true? The Passion doesn't just tell a story. It's like a return to the roots, to the original pain from which salvation was born. And Gibson, being a man with a classical Christian worldview, shows, yes, pain is an inseparable part of the path, but beyond it, there is light. Where the soul has passed through fire, there a new life begins. There is resurrection. Notice how he works with silence. In the moments when the hero is in pain, when he's dying, in those scenes, there is almost always silence. No music, no words, only breath, only a look. As if the screen becomes a mirror, as if the director is saying, "Here, look inside. This is you. This is your struggle, your death, your hope." But perhaps the most frightening question he asks is not what comes after death, but what comes before it. How do you live? For what? For whom? Are you moving toward the light or hiding in the shadows? Do you follow the truth, or have you sold your soul for comfort? In his world there is no gray. There is darkness and there is light. And a person always stands between them, and their choice is always decisive. One choice and you save. One choice and you perish. This is not a sentence, this is responsibility, and that is always scarier than a sentence. That's why his films grab you by the throat. That's why you can't dismiss them, because they ask the questions we've been running from for so long. Who are we? Why did we come into this world? What awaits us when the body stops and the soul moves on? And Gibson doesn't give direct answers, but he leads. It's as if he's leaving signs on stones, so that we ourselves may walk and find. If you watch closely, it becomes clear. Mel Gibson is not just a director. He is a storyteller of ancient truths, encrypted under the guise of Hollywood narratives. He doesn't make films about the afterlife in a direct way, because he knows direct words frighten, but symbols, metaphors, archetypes awaken. The soul reads between the lines. Where the mind still argues, the soul already understands. In his works there is almost always a moment when everything collapses. The hero loses loved ones. He is betrayed. He finds himself in hell, literal or internal. But it is in that hell that the miracle occurs. Return, transformation, silent rebirth. In Braveheart, it's the moment when Wallace, knowing death awaits him, does not retreat. He goes to the end, because he knows. Even one soul that becomes free ignites light for others. Oh, this is Gibson's secret. He doesn't speak about one person. He speaks about us. Through his characters he seems to ask, "And you? Are you ready to suffer for the truth? Are you ready to be the last one to say no when everyone else has surrendered? Are you ready to die in the body, to come alive in spirit? And if you've ever watched a film and felt that something ancient, almost forgotten, begins to stir deep inside, it means you've heard it. You've heard the call. And that call is not from the director. It's from beyond the veil. There's a strange pattern. Gibson's heroes often lose everything. They are left alone. They are abandoned, betrayed, broken. But it is precisely then that they become real. As if only in emptiness does a person remember who they are, without roles, without defenses, without masks. Only the soul and the choice, to be yourself or to break. Gibson does not offer easy paths. He doesn't lull the viewer to sleep. He pulls them out of their comfort zone. He makes them feel what they've been hiding from for years. Pain, loss, darkness. But through it comes cleansing, awakening, hope. There are scenes after which the theater is silent as a tomb, because the viewer realizes they haven't just seen a movie, they've seen a reflection of their own soul. Not entertainment, but a warning. And this is Gibson's greatest power. He doesn't try to please, he tries to reach. And again we return to the question, why? What is he trying to say with all this? What has he seen? What does he know? And why does he persist on this path, even when he's called a madman, a fanatic, an outcast? Maybe because he knows how little time each of us has. That life is not worth spending on illusions. That truth must be spoken, even if no one wants to hear it. And maybe because he has already looked beyond the veil and realized, there, beyond the boundary, they do not wait for the one who was successful, but for the one who remained human. And now, after we've walked through all these images, cries, suffering, and silences, the final, most important question arises, what are we supposed to do with all this? What do we do with what we've learned, felt, seen behind the image of Mel Gibson's films? This is not just reflection, this is a challenge, and not from the director, from life itself. Gibson shows us, the soul is not an abstraction, it's not a religious term, it's not philosophy, it's reality, very fragile, but eternal. It outlives the body, it outlives time, and everything you've done, every choice, every betrayal, every act of forgiveness, all of it is written into the soul, not in ink, but in pain, in love, in fear, in hope. He doesn't offer simple answers, but he hints, he points the way, like a guiding star. You are not just a viewer, you are a participant. Everything you saw on screen, that's your path. That's your soul walking through that jungle. That's you standing before a choice, to strike or to forgive, to run or to stay, to betray or to save. The world he shows is harsh, but then again, the real world isn't any softer. We've simply grown unaccustomed to looking truth in the eye. We've gotten used to hiding in series, in social media, in triviality, and he grabs us and pulls us out of that comfortable lie. He breaks the silence. He rips off the masks, because time is running out, because tomorrow may never come. Gibson's films are not answers. They are questions we are obligated to ask ourselves. What is death to you? An end or a passage? Do you live as if the soul is immortal? Or do you, like most, live as if tomorrow you'll be erased from the face of the earth and nothing will remain? If that's true, then what's the point of conscience? Of tears? Of memory? He doesn't moralize. He suffers with you. He shows that he himself has been through hell, inner, personal. His life, full of scandals, mistakes, downfalls, is no accident. It's part of the same story, the story of a man who fell but rose again, who lost everything but didn't lose his soul, and therefore has the right to speak and to show. His cinema is a mirror, sometimes frightening, sometimes painful, but necessary, because only by seeing your true self can you begin to change. You can, for the first time, say to yourself the truth. I'm not living the way I should. I forgot who I am. I forgot where I'm going. And maybe that's the great message of Mel Gibson. He doesn't carry truth like a prophet. He searches for it with us. He falls, rises, walks, and calls us to follow. Not because he knows the way, but because he believes the way exists. And the soul, even if it's lost, even if it's grown cold, can still find its way home. The question is, will you hear that call? And will you follow?